Get Stryker beam out of commissioner. This is going to be a real short trip. Okay, hit it!
Hey there, everyone. How's it going?
Good morning.
Yes. Morning.
Good morning. So, here we are. We have a awesome little show today. It was very last minute. In fact, I just put the thumbnail up, half hour ago?
Mm-hmm.
But we have an awesome guest. We have Jonathan Faber. I will let you then tell who you are and tell us what you do and what you've worked on.
Okay. Hey, it's Jonathan Faber, but
Faber. Okay.
Yeah, no problem. So I do special effects, visual effects in the film industry. I started out doing, I really started out doing set dressing, but I used to do miniatures, visual effects for miniatures, and now I do a lot of like specialty costume type stuff, like Iron Man armor and that kind of thing.
Awesome.
And scratch build Star Wars models. So
yeah, that's what we want to talk about.
Well, it's interesting as a guest. We've had various guests on from time to time, and usually you have somebody who has like a very specific set of skills, right? And that specific set of skills leads them into I started here and I ended up here, but it usually follows a cohesive line. Where you started with set dressing, I mean that's its own unique type of skill. And then you've done visual effects, art department, special effects, costuming, model building, and worked on quite a diverse range of films and TV shows from The Dark Knight, I think Mandalorian XLR, and a couple of, Guardians, which is a big favor of most watching. So it's kind of hard, right? Usually we have an easy jump off, like, hey, tell us what it was like, doing this. But I am curious, starting off in set dressing, if you don't mind just sharing a little bit how you did get into, like the visual effects and the modeling and the costuming. Is that something that just kind of took a natural progression? Was it something that you chose to sort of take a step forward, or?
Well, for me, I think it really all started when I was, 5 going on 6. And my mom took my brother and I to see this little movie called Star Wars. And back in 77. And, once I saw that, I was like, that's what I wanted to do. I want to do that kind of thing. And being I was a kid in a small town in Washington, and I didn't know anything about movies or how they were made or where to work or anything like that. So I moved to Seattle, and I knew I wanted to work. I knew I wanted to do visual effects, but I didn't know how to get into it. And so I just took any kind of like art department job I could get. And my first movie, I was doing set dressing, and that was kind of fun. So I started off doing that, and then I knew what I wanted to do, and so I just sort of worked towards that. And then finally, made the move to LA, and started actually working in visual effects and special effects. And
is there one that having a passion, especially as a creative, is there one that you prefer, like one over the other, one that you favor, like costumes versus modeling versus, is there one that you kind of, or do you just kind of, enjoy them equally across the board?
No, I definitely prefer making models, but they,
nice.
Unfortunately don't really do that much anymore. So
is it a lot of 3D printing?
Yeah. I mean, like visual effects, it's all CG now. So not all, but a lot of CG. Whereas when I first started, I used to, we used to make real models for movies, and even like the first Guardians I worked on, we did like bucks. There's a scene where Rocket has a ship and he crashes through another ship, and they needed the fireball, and so we built a model of Rocket's ship. It was really basic, and then did an explosion in the front, and they just took the explosion and used that.
Nice.
But I prefer models, miniatures, but costuming is really interesting. It's a whole new set of challenges, and it uses a lot of the same techniques, a lot of the same skills, and that model making does. So I still find it fun. But yeah, it's a very different, discipline.
What can you give us kind of a list of some of the movies that you've worked on throughout the years?
Yeah. Worked on Hugo, built a train for Hugo. Dark Knight Rises, we built a third scale tumbler that crashes through the ceiling that Bane steals. And then we did, I think it was a fifth scale airplane at the very beginning that Bane hooks up to.
When they catch the plane.
Wings rip off. And yeah, that was a miniature. What else? Did Interstellar. Help build the models for Interstellar.
So you got 2 Christopher Nolan movies on the belt.
Yeah.
That's amazing, man. Congrats.
Thanks. I was wishing there'd be more, but
is that this from Interstellar? Okay.
Yeah. That's the 15th scale ships. We did 15th scale and 5th scale. And that's the 15th scale stuff. That's the 5th scale. We didn't use that a whole lot, but we did. There's a scene where it's hooked up to the Endurance and it blows up, and that was all 5th scale stuff.
Okay.
So that's always, it's always fun to blow stuff up. But
well, that's funny because always figured a lot of model makers would not like blowing up their pieces that they spent so much time on.
Yeah, it's funny. People ask me that, like, oh, aren't you upset? Like, no, that's why you build it. We're building it to get a shot. It's not my own personal project.
Yeah.
And so we're building it to get a shot, and I'm, going in, we're building this to blow it up. And so,
but you're also not, when you're building something like this that is being used for, let's say, a pyro shot, non-hero or explosive shot, you're also not taking weeks or months going over every minute detail either, because so I think that sometimes as model builders ourselves, we know how much we obsess over the smallest of details and how long that takes. But we're starting to get used to the fact of talking to different people that it's like, no, you build it and you get it on screen. It's not,
Yeah,
so
and the pyro stuff's pretty rough. It's
you just don't realize it when you're seeing it in the effect.
It cuts so fast and explodes, and you don't see it very, very well. So
do you find it hard to like draw the line, because you're also a model builder, like for yourself, like your sketchbook models, to at some point like draw that line, like to actually think good is good enough for this shot? Is that difficult, or do you always want to take it one step further?
Yeah, no, it's difficult for me because I feel a little obsessive, and I know for Interstellar, I would come in early and leave late, and just to make sure I would could put on the detail that I wanted, and my boss like, okay, you can walk away now. It's like
it's hard. Yeah, I mean, Marvin being a perfectionist, it's one of those things where we always discuss like when is complete actually complete, right? There's always that coulda, shoulda, woulda. I can revise this, I can change that. And I can imagine when you're in a schedule and you're in the 11th hour and you have to get a shot out, you don't have the capacity or the ability to think that way. And that's going to be tricky for guys like us and yourself who have that, attention to detail and want to give that 150%. So that's going to be a little bit of a challenge. But I guess it's one of those things where you just have to sort of separate and divide, right?
Yeah, my boss at New Deal Studios, his expression was done is better than good.
Yeah, that's a good.
I guess so. In that,
It's another one we can add to the roster. Yeah, we've been learning some great statements.
Yeah, it was always difficult for me, but it's like, we have to get the shot. So
Do you think you could do that, Marvin?
Hey, which is what Jason said. You really have to you just have to completely separate your own feelings and the hobby from the production, and that's the only way. But I'll probably be like you, Jonathan. Like I'll probably stay a couple hours extra just for my own satisfaction, most likely. So maybe it's a good thing I don't work in the industry. I don't know.
I could picture Marvin going, "Hold on, George. I'm not trying to jump into your shop, but I just get to this one last little thing."
I don't know if I should tell this story, but I was the lead model maker on Interstellar, and so I kind of decided, we had art director on it, and we went off their drawings and their input and everything. But some of the stuff we sort of got to decide where it went and how it went. And there was a detail that they wanted on the ship that I hated, and so I just kept putting it off. I kept putting, oh yeah, we'll put that. Yeah, I'll get to that, and I kept putting it off intentionally, so we never had to put it on.
What was it?
It was some like conduit thing that I hated, and I was like, no, that's terrible.
Felt that it didn't just like work like cohesively, just didn't work with the design or the aesthetic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is, I mean, surprising because the production designer on that movie is incredible, but and the art director and everything, it's a great design team. But yeah, there's just one thing I didn't like. That I was like, no, I don't like that.
One thing, you think this would be a common question, and surprisingly, it's not. I think you can agree with me on that, Chris, right? So we've had quite a few guests, not just with the model show, but we have we sit with the sort of Rogue One 6 ensemble together, a number of other guests. And one thing we never really get to ask is, when you see your stuff on screen, in motion, when you're watching the film, especially a film like Interstellar, amazing movie, right? What does that feel like? And I know a lot of people say, well, you're working on something and you really have no idea until like you see it all come together. But when you do actually sit down and see it, like, is there like a sense of pride, or is there a sense of like, do you go back into that OCD mindset, like where what you worked on, so you're noticing and seeing things that most people aren't going to see in the audience, where you're like, oh, I wish I could have changed this, or what's that feeling like?
Yeah, it's kind of all the above. The first time I saw something I made on screen, I was thrilled. And just super exciting. And then the last time I worked on something, it's the same feeling. Like I'm still like, oh my God, look at that. We made that.
Nice.
But there's definitely moments, to go back to Interstellar, there was some things that I knew bugged me. And I was like, oh, what's that going to, and you see it on camera, or you see it on screen, and you're like, oh yeah, that looks terrible. Or that, oh, you can see that. Or
especially in IMAX, right?
Yeah, in IMAX, yeah. And then, it's funny, you go with friends and like, what are you talking about? What'd you see? What was, and other people don't really see it, but
a blink and you miss it. Yeah.
Like
I always try to think of it as like, it's like hearing your own voice, right? Versus like in your head versus a recording. And you kind of like, oh, wait a minute. I didn't know if it was like that same thing.
Yeah. No, it's I love it. I love seeing the stuff we made on screen and seeing it work, and especially like costuming is a little different. Like miniatures, especially like the pyro stuff, just seen on screen, like, oh, it worked. Yeah, it looks good. Okay, great. The costume stuff is a little bit easier in that regard, where you can tell on set, like, does this work or does this not work? So
this is a great image. I love that. I love this picture. This is so great.
Did you work on this Iron Man suit?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, help.
Now, if I remember correctly, you participated in the Hall of Armor, right?
We
6 or 7 suits?
Yeah, we did. I worked on that one too, the Iron Patriot, and the Hall of Armor we did. I think it was 1 through 7 that we remade 1 through 7. And a lot of those they weren't costumes. It was just like a statue, which and we did 2 versions. There was a hero version and a pyro version, because they were, that scene, spoiler alert, they blow up that room. And so we had to do a version where we could blow them up.
So is this mostly plastic, or is it foam, or?
Yeah, it's mostly plastic, urethane. Some of it's fiberglass, epoxy. And I think basically from the waist down, it's CG.
Okay.
Do you ever, when you see these things that you've worked on, when you see them become mass produced, like as a toy or Hot Toy or something like that, you ever purchase it just for the fun of like, hey, this is that's awesome.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've got a couple.
I saw your face lit up, so that was the answer right there, the smile.
Well, it's so funny because when I was a kid, I was a massive Lego fan. I still am. I still love Lego, and so I used to build a ton with Lego. And the first time I got to see a Lego minifig of a costume that I helped make was kind of mind blowing.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's gonna make for a fun way to collect, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't collect that much. I most of the stuff I collect is like toys of stuff that I had a hand in.
Okay.
Well, I mean, that's the best thing to have a display of pieces to say, hey, I've worked on this. I always wonder too, obviously they're scaling these things down significantly, but do you ever notice like, wow, they got this little detail correct? I didn't think they would.
Yeah, the I forget, was it the Hasbro, the Black Series figures that they did?
Mhm.
Yeah, they're amazing. Like I
So they
can't
catch a
some
lot
of
of
the
that
details.
detail, huh?
Yeah, it's really good.
So you worked on Guardians too.
Yeah, I worked on. Yeah, I was lucky enough to work on all three of them, and the Christmas special.
The Christmas special too.
Yeah.
Did you work on costumes on Guardians?
I did visual effects for the first one, and
Okay.
then 2 and 3 I did costuming.
Is this you painting on her face?
No, I I made the stencil
Oh, okay.
out of all things.
I was gonna say too. I was like, what a clean stencil that is. It's like,
Yeah. It's funny. I the first time for Guardians 2, I've worked on 3 different shops on the Guardians movies, and the second one, I was working at a model shop in North Hollywood, and we got this order in to laser cut these stencils, and I was like, okay. So I ran the laser cutter there, and I just laser cut these stencils, and I didn't know what they were for until I saw that picture. And that was like a year later, and I saw that picture. I was like, oh my god, that's what. Oh, okay, that's what that was.
You're like, what the hell am I making this for? And
Yeah,
then you realize later.
And then it turns out I from Guardians 2 through the Christmas special and 3, I cut all of her stencils.
Okay. I would have asked to paint her face because she's
Yeah.
really-
The only way you can make these stencils work correctly is if I have hands-on experience.
Yeah.
Sometimes,
Yeah. That's like
I
that
need
story with
hands-on experience with Nebula.
hands-on experience.
well, that's like that story with Nilo Rodis when he was doing the slave layer, and he's like, well, I have to measure up for the costume. And they always talk about who's the chick from Laverne and Shirley, Penny something.
Penny Marshall.
Penny Marshall. I guess she was there with Carrie, and she was like, "Yeah, I'm not gonna put you," kind of like the mother figure. And Carrie's like, "It's all right, it's for work." And Neela was like, "I was so afraid of Penny Marshall," and she was screaming at me, and because Carrie at the time being young and beautiful. But yeah, it's some of the perks of the job. But yeah.
And you worked on Mando as well too.
Yeah. I helped. Worked on the armor, the helmet, his weapons.
Nice.
Oh, nice. Okay.
That was really fun. That was, for a kid that grew up loving Star Wars and wanting to work on Star Wars, that was a dream come true.
Did you work? How many seasons did you work on Mando?
3 so far.
Okay.
Oh wow. Okay.
Hopefully 4. We'll see.
Hopefully 4. Did you get to dress Lizzo?
No, I actually don't. I don't go on set all that often.
No. Okay.
Yeah. Sometimes I get lucky to go on set, and I started puppeteering, so that's really fun.
That's interesting, huh?
Yeah. Well, I've done puppeteering before, but I got to start puppeteering for Mando and Star Wars. And
Oh, really? Did you the what's his name? The monkey? Drawing a blank on his name. Salacious Crumb.
Oh no, I mostly have done robot stuff. So like there's a scene in season 3 where they go to like the robot bar.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got to puppeteer a couple of those guys.
Okay, cool. Sweet.
Because they do always have like a couple of people from like the costume department on set, right? Just to fix things when they get broken and everything during filming.
Well, it's a weird mix of, because I work for Legacy Effects, and we'll normally go to set with the stuff we build, and we'll sort of be in charge of the stuff we build on set, and then there's a costume department on set that we interact with, we talk to, and we work with, but normally we take the stuff that we build.
Just one of the robots from the bar?
Yeah, it was originally from Book of Boba Fett. It's the rickshaw droid.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And I got to.
He kind of has like a Reese look to him, doesn't he? Kind of looks like a Reese robot.
Yeah, a little bit with those.
Like,
a little bit.
reuse from Jabba's palace.
Yeah. But I got to paint him, so that was really fun.
Nice.
I get to do a little painting every once in a while. I did that. We did an art exhibit, and I painted one of the pieces. And my boss saw. I was like, "Oh, that's really good. I'm going to have you paint the Winter Soldier's arm for
Nice.
Winter Soldier and Falcon." I'm like, "Oh, okay, great." And then as soon as he walks away, I'm like, "What? I'm gonna what?"
So have you worked on? Okay, so Endgame, Avengers, Guardians, Winter Soldier. What other ones?
Yeah, I worked on Iron Man 3, Guardians 1, 2, and 3, Captain Marvel, the first Avengers, and then Endgame. I've always got to think about it. Book of Boba Fett, Mando, Obi-Wan Kenobi.
That's quite an amazing resume,
It's a
especially
freaking
where like
crazy list. Holy
yeah, especially where like each movie or show you participated in a different way, working on different things. And again,
Yeah.
we don't see that too often, right? There's always the guys who are the computer renders and CGI. There's the practical effects guys. There's the supervisors, but seeing somebody, like I said, kind of jack of all trades, I think is really interesting. We'll pull up some of the scratch build pictures because I know that's something that we're salivating over. But I was curious, already having that skill, right? Being able to build models in scratch build, were you able to take some of the things that you were learning on set with tools and resources and kind of bring that into your personal model making? Because I noticed some things, some techniques you were using on ships that I had built as well were a lot more, I guess, professional and complex and clean, whereas like I did them in a very crude and rudimentary way. And I looked at it and kind of like put a light bulb off, like, oh wow, that would have been a much easier way of laying things out and making things like, I don't say easier to build, but more like understanding of the build as you're going through the process.
Yeah, I mean, I think I definitely learned like my mold making is really improved. Doing it professionally, and worked with some amazing mold makers, and it's just a different. Mold making is just kind of its own specialty, and just the way you look at something, it's sort of been described as like inside out and backwards when you're making a mold, and so that's definitely helped me in my scratch building, is learning how to make molds better and different techniques and materials. And originally when I was working in the film business, I was working in Seattle, and there weren't that many jobs, so I kind of had to learn how to do a bunch of different jobs, and that's really helped me.
Oh, diversify.
Yeah.
It is strange that, okay, so a lot of the people that we've talked to who are in the business don't get into like the scratch building stuff. They are mostly, like, let's get it in, get it done, get it made, and they don't even, at home, they do the same thing. I think you're one of the first people we've come across who into like kit bashing and stuff like that, because there's pictures here of the X-Wing.
Oh yeah,
droid strip.
Yeah, the droid strip.
Yeah, I was blown away. I didn't, most of the time we don't come across that.
Yeah, I
usually
love
see it like an ID form, but not like a in process build.
Yeah, I love kit bashing. I love it's just it's the closest I can feel to working with the ILM guys back in the 70s, is sort of doing getting the same model kits and going through the same process and cutting them and gluing them together. And
well, here's the bigger question: where are you getting your IDs at?
I've had some friends who have really helped me with IDs.
Okay.
I'm not fantastic at it. I've gotten better at it, just with all the model kits, going through all the model kits and everything. It's funny in that picture there. There's, I painted the edges red like you would in like a museum where it cut away, and there's one edge I missed, and it wasn't until recently that I realized, oh, I missed an edge.
Oh, the one that's coming out like this?
Yeah.
I saw that and I was like, oh, I think that's missing some red, but I don't want to. Yeah, I wasn't sure.
I'll have to go back and paint that someday.
I love the idea of this, and I was saying to Chris, I said, because I had mentioned to you through some of our conversations that I was familiar with some of your work through the RPF. It's always weird when you stop putting like a name to the or a face to the name or a person to like the avatar, what have you. And I was like, oh yeah, I've seen this. I followed this build. I kind of watched you post your step by step, and I had no idea now putting two and two together. But I did see this before, and I remember being so taken away because you flip through those books, right? Everybody has a copy of those books. You buy them at Barnes and Nobles, whatever, the very cool books, and you show cutaways. And you always, the back of your mind, I know it's super ambitious, but it's like, wouldn't it be great to build a cutaway AT-AT or a cutaway TIE bomber? But then, it's pretty exhausting to think about because it's such an ambitious task. But I think you nailed it. I mean, it's a beautiful job.
Oh, thank you.
This was what I was talking about a moment ago. So scratch building some things, it's like, okay, you do the research and the due diligence, you build the relationships that you build, you get help with IDs, you figure out the rest to the best of your ability. But this seems like the fact that you have the acrylic, you're able to see everything laid out very clean and very precise. One thing that I got into the habit of doing was basically priming things in different shades in order to better understand the layout and the build up. But this just visually looks so much more appealing as far as being able to like tackle the project. I really liked this when I saw this.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I it's funny because when I first started doing my TIE fighter, I realized pretty early on I realized, okay, I want to make a TIE fighter, a Darth Vader TIE fighter, and a interceptor. And so I was like, okay, I'll mold everything and cast it because then because the ball is the same, the cockpit ball is all the same. And I doing research, I realized, oh well, what I call the wing star, or I'm sure everybody calls it the wing star, is the same from a TIE fighter to a Darth Vader TIE fighter. They just took that and turned it and cut it and fit it in there. And it's interesting because you try to get stuff as accurate as you can, and then with the kit parts, and you put the kit parts on and go, okay, well this has to fit because this kit part fits there, and then you sort of dominoes down the line. And so I finished my regular TIE fighter, and then I started building my Darth Vader TIE fighter and put the wing star in, and then you have to add detail. And I sort of realized, oh, well, that's okay. I got that kind of wrong because that should fit. This should fit closer, and this part should fit further away. And it's a little frustrating to realize, like, oh, well, that's not quite right. But
this is an awesome piece. I love this.
Yeah, this is amazing.
Oh, thanks.
And jumping off on what you were just saying, that's been like one of the biggest key components. I had shared with Jonathan that one of the things we do is we sometimes will get together, and it's not a public conversation, but we're just joining to kind of help each other out and work on builds. And one of those things is like realizing like, hey, I measured this out, but once I put this donor part on, it made me realize that it was either too big or too small. The build isn't necessarily correct. And it's one of those things where, like you said, it should just kind of be, a domino effect where everything just kind of smoothly falls in a row. But another thing I was really impressed by was the TIE fighter. I think you said you were working on that for 11 years. Did I catch that correctly?
Well, it was from start to finish was like 11 years. I know that.
Yeah, but it's impressive because there's so much that goes into it. And again, I saw how well you were able to accomplish this and do so in such a precise way. I mean, this is beautiful. This is amazing.
Thanks.
This is all scratch built.
Yeah.
And cool shade too.
And real cool shade, yeah. Which
nice.
So I live in a second floor apartment, and I would take it to work every day to work on it. Not every day, but so I would take it to work. And one day I was working on it, and I had the cool shade in the wing, and I had the wing on the TIE fighter, but it wasn't glued on. And I'm trying to carry too much stuff, and I walk out the door, and one of the wings falls off.
Oh no!
Hits the top of the stairs, and then tumbles all the way down to the front door.
Oh no!
Yeah. So I had one wing I had to rebuild, and I had just enough cool shade to fix it. But
this the one that's sitting behind you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool shade isn't very forgiving if it takes a hit.
Man. And you can't find it anymore. I mean, I spent years collecting just to have enough to do one TIE fighter.
Looks great, man.
Thanks.
Looks amazing.
Yeah, and it's funny. People who don't know will see it and go, "Oh, that looks amazing." It'll, and they'll point something like, oh, but that part's a little bit off. Like, well, yeah, that's the accurate part.
Yeah.
Because they have it idealized in their mind.
Yeah. They don't realize how wonky these original models were, and how rough.
I'll be honest. I even told Jason a million times. I said I've never had an interest in a TIE fighter because I always figured it didn't display well because it was mostly, a lot of the sides you'd have to look straight on. Until I actually felt Cool Shade in my hand. I was like, wow, this stuff's amazing. Like I could just a whole TIE fighter built out of Cool Shade has got to be freaking just awesome. Awesome. One of these days I'll get one.
Yeah, it's really heavy too. I was surprised how heavy the model was when I finished. It's like 8 pounds.
Yeah, it is heavy and difficult to cut. I've had so many people when I was working on my tie give me different tips and tricks on how to cut it. Yeah. Some like more aggressive than others, and I'm just like, well, I don't have those tools and resources, so I can't just go. Although that seems like a better way of doing it. And then there's that, the slow way of just kind of nipping each one, but then they're kind of springing and bouncing, and it was a long process trying to figure out how to even establish it. And there wasn't a lot of reference online either. Like people would be like, oh, you got to lay it down this way and do it that way, and so there was a lot of trial and error there, but. You're right. When you have things like Cool Shade that you can't just go out and buy another one, or pick some up when you mess it up, you really have to be, very, very careful with the process. But yeah, some of these scratch builds, I was really taken aback by them. And as you know, I was a huge fan of the Joe Johnston snow speeder that you did. Man, this is beautiful work on that.
Well, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always love that design. The Y-Wing is one of my favorite ships ever from anything. And I just love that the Y-Wing in general. I just love, and then I saw that Joe Johnston concept, and it's like, well, that makes sense. The rebellion doesn't have any money, they don't have any resources, so if they got an old broken down Y-Wing, they'll turn it into something else.
Yeah,
and I love the idea and the design. So once I started building a Y-Wing, I thought, well, why don't I'll make a concept snowspeeder while I'm at it. So.
Gorgeous,
this has been one of my favorite designs. And one thing I noticed, I don't know if a lot of people will pick up on it. So, and I could be wrong in assuming that this was intentional, but I noticed on the opposite side, you had that one random white panel.
Yeah.
And if you look at the screen used speeder, I think it's the one with the gray, not the orange, but it's got that one random white panel on the back.
Oh yeah.
Is that why you did that, to kind of?
I actually didn't. I wanted like some sort of variation, and I thought, well, I'll have a panel that got blown off, and they had to replace it with another panel that was off of a Y-Wing. That's why it's white.
I see. Okay.
If
anybody notices,
it'd be cool if you had like part of that white panel have like a half of a white stripe or something. They just took the piece and put it on there.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be really cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do like how the white was crunched up near the blast mark, how it was, Yeah.
I did that blast mark like 6 times. I hated it every time until the last time. And then the last time I was like, it's all right. And that was like, okay, I'm walking away.
It's a gorgeous piece, man.
Thanks.
And is there a lot of kit parts on? I'm sorry,
no,
Marvin, go ahead.
No, there's on the very back, there's a few kit parts, so that's about it. And in the cockpit, there's some, but yeah.
What were you asking, Marvin?
No, I was just wondering because this looks fun, and you talk about it as if it was a lot of fun to build, So my idea is what the crew at ILM was able to do, like in the 80s, is that they got this sketch, this rough sketch, and they were actually allowed to put a lot of themselves into the actual final build. And the way you were talking about Interstellar, it almost sounds like it's much more designed out nowadays. So when you build it, you have less freedom as a builder to at that level of detail. And I'm just wondering if that's correct.
Yeah, it's pretty strict now, pretty restricted as to what here's what they want, and here's the design. Stick to that.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, we get we did a couple scenes where Mando he takes his armor off to fix, and there's stuff on the inside, and some stuff like that we got to play with, and we got to come up with ourselves, and But for the
those
most part,
electronics,
yeah, for the most part, it's here's the drawing, stick to that.
Yeah,
I think this is one of the closest representations I've seen, because I've seen a few variations of the Joe Johnson Snowspeeder, but the way you have the back engine, exhaust lights, whatever you want to call them, kind of angular like that, and then the slats, and then it's pretty spot on.
And it's always hard to build something 3D from a 2D drawing. You realize like, oh well, those can't line up that way in real life. So
yeah. Is it styrene, or is it made of styrene, or is it?
No, it's all. I 3D printed almost all of it.
Okay.
And then I made molds because it's going to be the head of a Y-wing eventually. I'm building a Y-wing, and so I just made molds and cast it all out of urethane.
Well, let's get
Kill
to
two
your
birds.
Y-wings.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too, Jason.
Yeah. So that picture, that's all printed.
Okay.
And then those are either all real kit parts or casting of a kit part that was hollow, and I didn't, because I knew I was going to mold this because I wanted to make two.
Okay.
So I didn't want to have any, major undercuts.
Right.
So if I had a part that was hollow, I would make a mold and cast it and then put it on here so that I wouldn't have to worry about it.
Nice.
But it's all, I bought all the, I'm buying all the correct kits and trying to, and like you were saying earlier about IDs, I've had some friends and people on the RPF who've really been really generous and helped me out with some IDs. And, unfortunately, some of them you can't share. Someone tells you like, well, someone told me this, you can't tell anybody else. Like, okay, but
yeah, we run into that a lot.
Yeah. Which is, I understand, but it's too bad. But I've had a lot, I've had some people really help me with some great information.
And are you doing an X-wing too? I put up a picture here. You have droid strip.
Yeah, I started my first scratch build was, or first Star Wars reproduction scratch build was the TIE Bomber.
Okay.
And then when I was doing the TIE Bomber, I started working on the X-wing, and then I kind of put it aside because I was collecting kits. And then it's sort of been on the back burner because I've been collecting kits and collecting information, and I keep getting better and better information. So that's on the list to build, but it's not going to be for a while.
The X-wing.
Yeah. I started it, but it's going to be down the road. I've got, I think, 3 or 4 other ones in front of it that I want to do.
I said to Jason before the show, I said, you very rarely see somebody actually take the time to build the droid strip. They're always just casting it and putting it on. Because a lot of times they just cast it. It's more accurate if it's cast on, let's say, some X-wings. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, but I love this. This is great.
Yeah, that is beautiful. It's kind of like the Ys. We did a deep dive into the Y-wings recently.
Yeah, I saw that episode.
Yeah, it was really, you could see how kind of unprepared we were, but it was one of those things where like it happened by accident, where I had been working on a red jammer and we started noticing little things. I'm like, hey, this kind of looks like that and that looks like this, and this is mainly cast, and it's like kind of like what came first, the chicken or the egg, and then how the other Y-wings came from it. But it's weird because a lot of the other ships that are scratch built that are done in such a fantastic way, the Y-wings are in person just very crude. They're very rough. And it's so surprising, right? Because some people look at it and say, oh, well, shouldn't it be much more, laid out and cleaner and symmetrical? And no, it's just like a hodgepodge of just stick this on, stick that on. And it's interesting because some of them even made it into a number of hero shots, but the Y-wings specifically don't have that cleanliness and sort of, sort of form factor look as some of the other ships like the TIE Fighter or the Bomber or even some of the X-wings, which we're still kind of, picking that apart. And it was funny because John, who unfortunately wasn't able to make it today, after me and Chris were going back and forth, sharing images and then jumping on for chat, John's like, oh yeah, I've done 15 of them. I could have helped you out with that. I'm like, it's like, it's all right. Well, nothing wrong with what you got wrong. Now, did you did work on the Rocketeer as well, right?
No, I wish I did.
Oh, okay.
I
Rocketeer
love
was a long time ago, Jason.
Well, I mean, he's old.
Long.
I'm old.
Yeah, it's not too far off. If you started in your late teens, right?
Yeah.
I think that's
20s,
wasn't that the 90s it came out? Early 90s? Late 90s? Mid 90s?
Was it that? Oh, I didn't know it was that long
Yeah.
ago. I thought
Yeah,
it was like
it's
an
that long
early.
ago.
I think
Okay.
it
It's a long
was
time ago.
2000s?
93 or something like that.
It was a
Oh,
long
wow.
time
So was
ago.
it? Okay. So we're
It was
talking
young
already-
Jennifer Connelly.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oof.
Young Jennifer Connelly.
1991, guys. 1991.
91. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so I was a little off. My apologies, but this
That's
is
when
a
I
beautiful
graduated.
Yeah, I started in the business when I was 19, so been doing it a while.
So you made this for yourself?
Yeah, I had a friend who worked on the movie, and
Okay.
they had a production made helmet, and said, "Hey, I've got one. If you want to mold it and cast them up, just don't do too many." So I did like 3 of them. I was like, "Yeah, okay, great." So
Did you happen to sell one to Joseph? A guy named Joseph?
no, I haven't sold any.
Okay.
And it's probably the worst mold I've ever made.
Okay.
It just barely worked.
Well, that looks great.
Oh,
Yeah, I was gonna say it looks good. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
It was a lot of work after I got out of the mold. It was a lot of work to get it to look okay.
Yeah.
Eventually, I'll do a rocket pack, but that's down the road.
Yeah.
I was gonna say I'm not too familiar with the movie, but it explains why. Because it's a little before. I wouldn't say before my time. I would have been old enough to see it, but I was a kid at the time. So yeah.
Yeah. So Joe Johnson directed it. So
Yep.
I found that out later. That was like
Yeah.
one of his, other than Honey I Shrunk the Kids, one of his first movies, right?
Yeah.
First
Yeah.
movies.
It's great. I love it. It's a great movie.
Did you work on these costumes?
I did. Yeah. I actually got to go to set. It was my first time going to set for Guardians. I went with these costumes.
These are pretty crazy.
Yeah, it was. I remember, being in the shop and talking about it, and I it's like, this is one of the dumbest costumes I have ever seen, and I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
It's just such a weird idea. There's like these flesh costumes, and I fell in love with them. I just think they were so great.
Big fat
Especially for
costumes.
Guardians, you must have been getting hit with some of the most oddest things. Like, what am I looking at? Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially for the third one. The third one, there's, we did
Yeah,
a
there is.
ton of makeups for all the weird humanimals, and it's just some crazy stuff. Like, what are we doing? Like that guy, I worked on his hair, and I just remember getting the parts and like, what is this?
Wow.
Well, it's grass, but it's his hair. Okay.
I thought
I
it
think
was
that's
like
what makes Guardians.
I haven't seen 3, but he's like a pineapple, right?
I think it's like a carrot. That's what they said anyway. It's about a carrot.
I feel like that's what makes.
Yeah, Chris. Sorry.
I feel like that's what makes Guardians so great. Is like it's very different than everything that's out right now. Like,
yeah,
it's so bizarre, but works.
But it's not campy. It's tolerable.
No.
Like it's an enjoyable way. Yeah.
Yeah. Which I'll be honest, I was afraid. Like, I loved Guardians 1 and 2, and I was there was a whole bunch of Marvel movies where they didn't do so great. The stuff looked great, but the stories weren't great. And then when Guardians was coming up, I was like, oh God, I hope they do it right this time. And they did. They did a good job on it. I have to say.
Yeah, I like number 3. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember the first one. I was working in a shop, and a friend of mine was like, "Oh, have you seen the Guardians of the Galaxy trailer?" And I was like, "The Guardians of what?" No.
Yeah.
And I went home that weekend, saw the trailer. I was like, "Oh my God, that looks fantastic!" Came in the next week to work, and they said, "Well, we have this new job. We're working on Guardians of the Galaxy." It's like, all right.
It's awesome. I love Guardians. It's actually very close to Star Wars as well. Like,
Yeah,
especially the first 2.
yeah. I kind of got the same feel. It gives me the same feeling that Guardians movies.
Yeah. With Rocket and Groot being Han and Chewbacca, pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And all the ships and different worlds and creatures, and they were a ton of fun to work on.
Oh yeah. Do you ever bring anything home from any of the sets?
I wish. Yeah, you get in big trouble for that these days.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. And we've had people fired for, what someone might think is innocent. You take a picture of something and they post
really?
it, and that's it.
Oh,
You're
really?
fired.
Something like
Oh,
that, huh?
Jesus.
Yeah.
Wow. One thing I
Yeah.
was I had a conversation with somebody recently, and I found it interesting. So talking about that, like how specific and strict they are. One of the things was how many things get tossed away, and I said, well, is this intentional? And he said, well, it's kind of it is and it isn't. One is because it's like just resources and space. There's so much going on in the shop that like, hey, clear the table and get the next thing on. But he was saying at the same time, it's not that you want to like preserve the piece or save it for your own, like to take home, but to maybe use that piece at a later date. Like, hey, I made this really clean cast. This could be reused on a ship or for another design, and then you're kind of back to the drawing board. So it's kind of this like, some of the, I guess that strict, policy can kind of sometimes limit or even create a little bit more work at times. I don't know if that applies to everybody, but in this one conversation, I did find that to be interesting. That this could have potentially saved time, but otherwise, it's like, it's better to redo it than to save it or hold on to it.
Yeah, I know. A lot of people deal with the issue of, we don't have room for this. We don't have room for the molds and the parts and all that, all that stuff, and so a lot of stuff gets thrown away for that reason. But yeah, I wish they would save more. Just sometimes it would be convenient to reuse it, and then other times I just think just for history's sake, I wish they'd keep that.
Yeah.
I have a question for you. So, I was just looking at this picture of the wing for the TIE bomber, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna bring it up. What made you decide to scratch it since the original idea is the NPC wing?
Oh, I did. That's for the Darth Vader.
Oh, this is Darth Vader one. Okay.
Yeah.
That's the next
all right.
one. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. My TIE bomber, I used the NPC.
Okay.
Darth Vader. And of course, as typical, I didn't realize they used 2 left wings until after mine was done.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I'm not going to go back and redo it. So
sweet. These are all cast pieces.
Yeah.
These orange ones.
Yeah. Whatever the solar panel material is I have no idea what it was. So
yeah, it's not even known yet, is it, Jason?
For which part? Oh,
solar panel.
we were talking about it maybe being like a light diffuser cap, like when you see the overhead lights. It's the closest thing I can think of, especially when you run your fingers over it. It's got that same feeling, and plus it makes sense. Like, again, I'm just drawing conclusions that are the most likely scenario where when they moved into the model shop and they were kind of building it up and there was just trashing whatever was left behind, it made sense that they would have taken down the lights, and the lights at that time had those covers. If you guys remember, like in the 80s, being kids, like department stores, whatever, all the lights had those on it. So it makes sense to just crack that off and use that. That's the closest I can think. And I chatted with you about it for a bit, Marvin, and I think you agreed that that's more than likely what it might be.
Yeah, I got some of this stuff, which is actually a diffuser panel, but it's a modern one, and the sizes seem to line up. But this is one of those parts you're never going to find the actual diffuser panel that they had in the, because it was off-brand or no brand. So in the end, you're going to have to find something that is just has the right spacing and
pretty close.
But yeah.
Did you finish this X1, John?
No, that's where it stands right now.
Okay.
I kind of set it aside for right now, but I'll get back to it soon.
Still a pretty looking.
You're not the only one who had that idea. I mean, I had the same idea. Like, I've never done anything TIE fighter with. As soon as I build that ball, it's gonna go into rubber, because of course you can build it out to a Vader TIE fighter and a TIE Interceptor at some point. With minute differences, but still,
Yeah. The Interceptor light diffusion for the wings, which is, of course, the Interceptor, the regular TIE, and the Darth Vader TIE all have different material. But the TIE Interceptor, I dumbed across what I think is the correct diffusion material at a local hardware store.
Yeah.
And I bought a bunch of it.
Nice.
I actually think I think I actually got some of that through our mutual friend.
Oh, from Joe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I actually have your stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Are there any other projects you're working on or in the mix or?
Yeah. Well, it's, I've got to get I tend to work on too many at one time, but I'm sure I'm alone in that.
You're definitely not alone.
But yeah, so I want to finish the Darth Vader tie and the Y-wing. And then after that, I'm going to switch gears and I want to do a Viper from BSG.
Okay. Nice.
Of course, what normally takes the longest on my models is A, figuring out what the kits are, and then B, trying to buy them.
Yeah, I'm running into the same.
Yeah.
I'm working on a sandcrawler right now, and every time I get to a section, there's one part that I gotta find on eBay for one tiny little piece, and it's like, it just stops production right dead straight in this tracks.
Yeah, it's really frustrating. That's a lot of my models. That's why they take so long. Is I'll get to a point and then I got to get the kit. Well, it could take you 2 years to get the right kit.
Yeah.
We've seen that.
They're hard to come by, some of them. Yeah. But okay, so you probably, like we said before, you probably can't talk about some stuff, but like you worked on Ahsoka.
Yeah.
Right. You said you could talk about what you did on Ahsoka, right?
But just no spoilers, right?
Just sort of generally, I can't really talk about specifics because it hasn't come out yet. But I did a lot of the same kind of specialty costuming stuff, and
And you're
one thing that I think is interesting.
You're currently working on something that you can't mention, though, right?
Well, currently I'm unemployed, but I
so
did work.
If anybody's watching,
I
did work on something recently, that I can't talk about.
Okay.
So how's it been seeing? Like I remember. Now this is going a bit of a ways back, but it there's a point to my question here, or it leads to the point. Like I remember seeing originally, like when The Amazing Spider-Man came out, Tobey Maguire, and what a big deal it was for that Spider-Man suit. It was like $100,000 to produce, etc. It was a big deal. Now, I mean, you can probably have somebody knock one of those off you, as a garage build. Since you've been in the industry and worked on so many different movies across the board, as long as you have you seen, even with like the costuming, like with the Ahsoka, for example, doing some costuming, the technology of how the costumes are made and how they're put together, like has that, like just like resources for modeling, for example, 3D printing, laser cutting, things that weren't available in the 70s and 80s, has that also been something that's changed significantly, or is that still like kind of an old school skill that stays as is? Or
it depends in costuming, like a lot of I feel like I should ask my friends to do it, but a lot of like the fabrication part is kind of stayed the same as far as I know. I mean, there's always new materials and new techniques and everything, and people I work with at Legacy are amazing. But yeah, a lot of the hard stuff, the armor and the accessories and everything, all that's all totally different now. There's a lot of 3D printing, a lot of new materials, and like the armor, like on say a stormtrooper, back in the 70s, you'd vacuum form it all. Something like that today we do out of a flexible material, so it would be a lot more durable on set and more comfortable.
So you don't have any poking into your skin and cutting you, and that makes sense.
We did the Dark Trooper costumes for, I think, was it season 2? And those were all, those were all big guys. They're all like 6'4" stunt performers, and that was all like a flexible material. Still, I'm sure it wasn't comfortable to wear, but that was all. Yeah,
you don't realize like costuming. I've talked to a few people who've actually wore costuming. Like the agility and the ability to move around like naturally in free form inside some of these outfits aren't as because a lot of people say, oh, like why would they cut corners and go straight to CGI? It's not necessarily that it always looks better. Well, I think it sometimes limits a natural performance for the actor too, right? So you kind of have to do like a half and half, what works, what doesn't, and then find material that would work well with the body's natural movements too. So there's a lot more of a science that goes into it as well, right?
Yeah, definitely. And some of it just, it looks great on screen and it looks great on the computer, but when you go to make it in real life, it just doesn't work. Like you can't have two things occupying the same space at the same time. So, it's in the computer, it's fine because you can just have things crash into each other and it doesn't matter. But if you go to build it for real, you realize like, well, that's never going to work because it just won't fit. I
always found the costuming stuff pretty fascinating because it's one of those things that I think we take for granted, right? And you don't realize how complex it really is, or even just the discomfort to the actor. We see plenty of prosthetics and makeup sessions. Oh, this one sat for 9 hours for the Grinch makeup, but just the costume in and of itself, like the heat, the weight, everything that comes along with it, can be pretty overwhelming.
Yeah, it's amazing what the actors and stunt performers go through with these costumes on is amazing. Just like you're saying, they'll show up at like 2 or 3 in the morning for makeup, put makeup on, then you got to go to costume, get the costume on, and then you've got to shoot for 12 hours, 14 hours, and then you've got to go take the costume off and get the makeup off, and and some of this, like the Dark Troopers, that stuff was heavy. Like that was a big heavy costume. They're big guys, but it was a heavy costume.
Yeah.
And it's funny, like you were saying about agility. We had one guy who said something about, I can do the splits in this. And we're like, no, you couldn't. And then next thing you know, he's doing the splits on the ground. Like, oh, okay.
Please don't do that. Please don't
exactly.
do that.
Yeah, don't do that again. But
don't do that.
Yeah.
I got to fix this thing. You mess it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. If you're on set, some departments like, okay, that's a wrap, and they go home. Other departments like, okay, that's a wrap. Now I've got 4 hours to fix for something for tomorrow.
Oh, that's right. Repairing something that has to be reshot, or yeah, I didn't even think of that. Yeah. But it's
what was
not
your
often we get to Chris.
What was your favorite movie to have worked on?
Probably Interstellar.
Okay.
Now I did work on a movie that I thought was awful, but it was a ton of fun to work on. Battleship. Yeah, based on the board game.
Rihanna.
Okay. I don't know. So
the end result, you mean, wasn't the best, but you enjoyed the project itself.
The process was a ton of fun because we got to build big miniatures, blow them up, and we were in we blew up a lot of. There's a lot of water involved. So we did it we had built a big pool, and we shot a lot of it in the water. So it was like summer. We spent all day in the pool blowing stuff up.
Those ships were miniatures.
Well, it was again like the Guardians 1 where they used the explosions and they comped the explosion onto it. Yeah.
Oh.
But it was a ton of fun. But yeah, the end result was
you don't even think of that, right?
What's that,
Marvin? I'm sorry.
No, do you have like a single favorite piece that you made in all productions? Like, what's your absolute favorite piece?
That's a really good question. The spaceships from Interstellar were one of my favorites, and then also working on the tumbler. Getting to build a tumbler was pretty cool.
Was that probably because it was closest to your heart, being like more models, or was there some form of complexity to the model that made it just really enjoyable?
No, it was just that I loved the Christopher Nolan Batman movies. I thought were so good, and then getting to work on them and getting to sort of build an iconic piece to that, with the tumbler. That was really fun.
Sweet.
Yeah, working on something like that, I can picture real quick. So like the movie Elf, where it's like Santa, I know him. I could picture being there, like I built that,
Yeah. What was funny when I went and saw Dark Knight Rises, and there were a bunch of people in the audience watching the credits, and and some guy was leaving and was like, I don't know why you guys are sitting here watching a bunch of names of people you don't know. It's like, well, actually, I'm up there, so
Yeah, there you go.
Did you tell him that? Did you say that?
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's funny.
Yeah, how's your foot taste, buddy?
Yeah. Yeah. There's no credits after Batman, so but yeah. But well, I think that's a good place to stop. This was a lot of fun, Jonathan. I really appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it was great, especially the wide range of movies that you have been on, and also the wide range of things that you have done in these movies. Very impressive, and a lot of these things are pretty important to us. So
Yeah.
I'm sure I can speak for the other guys and just saying thank you for working on these, making such awesome stuff for us to enjoy and
My pleasure.
possibly build. Like I would love to build that rocket mining ship that he crashed through the other one. Like
Yeah.
I love the Guardians movies, and I'm not like, I've thought about having the Benatar even done as well as the Milano, because I like both of them so much. So, but yeah, it was a great chat. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
No, thanks.
That was that.
And
It's not
good
often
to
that
meet
we get to touch upon
What'd you say?
different subjects.
what'd you say, Jonathan?
Oh, it's good to meet everybody.
Yeah, it was great having you. We'll definitely have to have you on again.
I'd love to.
A little bit, once you get back to work and you can tell us all the secrets that you're not supposed to.
In 1 month's time, Ahsoka's been on, so then you can just show a picture of every little thing he had his hands on, right, Jonathan? Not sure if it works that
So-
way, but
You said you did costuming in Ahsoka, right? You didn't do any modeling at all?
No, just especially costume. Yeah.
Okay, because I would really want to find out about that big red and white ship. I want one of those. So,
Oh yeah, that's
but
John Gibson did that.
yeah, I heard. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I got to talk to him at Celebration. It was amazing model, just amazing.
It is an amazing model. Yeah.
It's a beautiful piece.
Oh.
And I just realized recently that because everybody was trying to get pictures of the cockpit, that like somebody's there's a little Ahsoka in there, isn't it? In the cockpit.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is.
It's a little
But,
blurry, but I think it's Ahsoka.
Thanks everybody for joining us. This was a fun one, and we're actually going to have a couple more people coming along that have been on the shows, right, Jason? We have some others guests possibly lined up.
Yeah, get a couple of guys
Yeah.
lined up, and hopefully Jonathan will join us again as well. And
love to.
I'd like to be honest, I'd like to, in addition to having another guest, maybe have someone else like yourself, Jonathan, that can kind of sit in, and because it's one thing for us to sort of put you on the spot and ask questions and pick apart, hey, what's this like and what's that like? But when you have a colleague of sorts who's working on the same stuff, I feel like there's a little bit of a better understanding, right?
Yeah.
That might be interesting as well. But yeah, we get a few guests coming up that I think will be fun and interesting, and yeah, just looking forward to learning more and understanding more, and just kick it back and talking about.
Maybe we could set it up where we could have Jonathan and Alex and somebody else all at one time, like, and just talk about cool stuff that happens behind the scenes, and just in inner office stuff. You know what I'm saying? So
That'd be fun.
watershed talk.
Put them in a circle, and then we throw in one outrageous statement about the industry, and just see what happens.
Get them all rocked up.
And fight. Let them fight.
I remember the time when
Yeah.
All
But
right, about to sign out. Just hang on for a sec. And
Yeah,
then,
don't go anywhere, Jonathan. We'll just sign out, and we'll talk after. See you, everybody.
Bye.
Yes. Well,